All right, American Government. This is the ninth edition by James Wilson and John DeLulio. See how old this is. Oh, wow, this is pretty old. We're looking at 2004. What? So we're looking almost 18 years ago. Oh, excuse me. Yeah. So a lot has changed since then. I mean, we've had a few different presidents, especially this last, maybe 5 years, have been more unique than than many years prior. But let's go ahead and jump into it. We have part one, the American system. Part two, opinions, interests, and organizations. Part three, institutions of government. Part four, the politics of public policy. And part five, the nature of American democracy. Let's go under civil liberties, right? Because in today's world, it's a big issue, civil liberties and all that kind of good stuff. So, sorry, I was reading a message. So under under civil liberties, we have politics, culture, and civil liberties. Interpreting and applying the First Amendment. Speech and national security. What is speech? Who is a person? Church and state. Crime and due process. Let's do speech and national security, right? The reason I kind of say that is as almost ridiculous as this could seem, is as whether you agree with this or you disagree, our ex-president is basically banned from media, right? Whether this is constitutional or not, it's very difficult to say. So let's go under speech and national security, 503. Speech. Here, let's look at this. Look at this picture right there. Right? You see the two women? I mean, they kind of, I had to double check and to see if it was two women too, so don't worry. I don't know when this was, but let's go ahead. Let's see what it says. Let's see what they are. Women picketed in front of the White House urging President Warren Harding to release political radicals arrested during his administration. All right. So here we go. Mr. President, remember the Constitution. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. The political prisoners who believed in this guarantee are now serving 20 years in prison. That is very interesting because in the United States is supposed to be freedom of speech, right? But this is during President Warren Harding. I have to see what year that was. I apologize. I don't know this. For all you people that are kind of like me and don't know who this person is, let me show you a picture. So this guy, there you go. Now we have a face to a name. Oh, there's a color one. There's one. Okay. So let's see what years he was president. Presidential term 1921 to 1923. He died August 2nd, 1923. Well, how did he die? Uh, 29th president. See, we're going on a tangent. I apologize. Cause of death: myocardial infarction. All right, he died natural causes, I guess. Something I don't know what it is, so it's natural. All right, let's go. Interpreting and applying the First Amendment. The First Amendment contains the language that has been issued in most of the cases to which we have thus far referred. It has roughly two parts: one protecting freedom of expression. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. And the other protecting freedom of religion. Congress shall make no law representing an establishment of religion or abridging the free exercise thereof. Speech and national security. The traditional view of free speech and free press was expressed by William Blackstone, the great American jurist, in his commentaries published 1765. A free press is essential to a free state, he wrote, but the freedom that the press should enjoy is the freedom from prior restraint. That is, freedom from censorship or rules telling a newspaper in advance what it can publish once a newspaper has published an article or a person has delivered a speech. That paper or speaker has to take the consequences if what was written or proves to be improper, malicious, or illegal. The U.S. Sedition Act of 1798 was in keeping with traditional English law. Like it, the act imposed no prior restraint on publishers. It did, however, make them liable to punishment after the fact. The act was an improvement over the English law, however, because unlike the British model, it entrusted the decision to a jury, not a judge, and allowed the defendant to be acquitted if he or she could prove the truth of what had been published. So basically, freedom of speech is perfectly fine as long as you're telling the truth. So by the Sedition Act of 1798, then it would be Facebook and Google and YouTube who would be responsible, since they are technically the publishers of the content. Maybe that doesn't make sense, right? So whatever Donald Trump would say on it, Facebook or Twitter or whatever would be directly responsible for it. If it's anything that's posted on their sites is inaccurate by the Sedition Act of 1798. Although several newspaper publishers were convinced under the act, none of these cases reached the Supreme Court. When Jefferson became president in 1801, he pardoned everyone who had been convicted under the Sedition Act, though Jeffersonism objected vehemently to the law. Their principal objection was not to the idea of holding newspapers accountable for what they published, but to letting the federal government do this. Jefferson was perfectly prepared to have the states punish what he called the overwhelming torrent of slander by means of a few prosecutions of the most prominent offenders. It would be another century before the federal government would attempt to define the limits of free speech in writing. Perhaps recalling the widespread opposition to the sweep of the 1798 Act, Congress in 1917 and 1918 placed restrictions not on publications that were critical of the government, but only on those that advocated treason, insurrection, or forcible resistance to federal laws, or attempted to foment disloyalty or mutiny in the armed service. Well, I guess so. Freedom of speech doesn't really exist, right? I mean, they're pretty much saying that you can't say everything you want to say. You can only say truthful facts that have data and can be backed up, and don't you dare say anything against the United States government or start a mutiny within the military. In 1919, this new law was examined by the Supreme Court when it heard the case of Charles T. Sinek, who had been convicted of violating the Espionage Act because he had mailed circulars to men eligible for the draft, urging them to resist. Wow. At issue was the constitutionality of the Espionage Act and more broadly, the scope of Congress's power to control speech. One view held that the First Amendment prevented Congress from passing any law restricting speech. The other held that Congress could punish dangerous speech. For a unanimous Supreme Court Justice, Oliver Wendell Holmes announced a rule by which to settle the matter. It soon became known as the clear and present danger test. Wow. I'm not going to read all this right now, but this is much more interesting than I thought it was, right? Much more interesting, because then you got the dude like, wow, what is speech? A liberal or libel is a written statement that defames the character of another person. If the statement is oral, it is called a slander. In some countries, such as England, it is easy to sue another person for libel and to collect. In this country, it is much harder. For one thing, you must show that the libelous statement was false. If it was true, you cannot collect no matter how badly it harms you. Interesting. And let's just put it like this. Sorry, I read it in my head. I'm gonna read it to you now. A beauty contest winner was awarded $14 million, later reduced on appeal, when she proved that Penthouse magazine had libelled her. The actress Carol Burnett collected a large sum from the libel suit brought against a gossip newspaper. But when Theodore Roosevelt sued a newspaper for falsely claiming that he was a drunk, the jury awarded damages of only 6 cents. Boom. This is all very interesting. I didn't even know anything about libel, but I did know slander.